Hey everybody, and welcome to another Kunoa Reviews. Today we talk about an indie horror game that was a big success on Kickstarter back in the day. The Beast Inside promised a gripping story spanning two different timelines and would offer photorealistic graphics with photo-scanned objects and clever and engaging puzzles that were more than just find a button and press it to open the door. I saw a video of a released demo a few years ago and was definitely intrigued, not only by the visuals, but also the type of puzzles that were presented. But after that, the game kind of fell off the radar for me, and it wasn't until early of this year that I picked the game up. It's a shame really, because the game has some excellent qualities. It does certain aspects of the horror genre really well, and I can wholeheartedly recommend this game to any fans of horror games, or just adventure games in general. There is unfortunately one major thing that does set the game back, and prevents it from setting a new standard in the indie horror game genre. But I will talk about that later, so let's first begin with the positives. The game follows the story of Adam and his wife Emma, who's expecting a baby, as they move out to an old house in the countryside surrounded by lush forests and high mountains. It becomes clear that Adam works for the government and that his job has to do with code breaking. This particular story takes place at the end of the 70s, so the Cold War is still in full effect. As you enter the house and start to move in all the boxes from the car, you stumble upon a peculiar device in the attic and notes that reveal a second story of a so-called Nicholas, who used to live in the same house too in the previous century. This is the second storyline and immediately has a more familiar tone with games like Amnesia, since they take place in the same kind of time period, with you holding an oil lamp to illuminate the place. You will switch between Nicholas and Adam in each chapter to uncover what exactly is going on. As mentioned before, the game promised to deliver photorealistic graphics, and the Unreal 4 engine was put to amazing use, as the game is an absolute beauty. From the moment you step out of the car and look upon the house and enter it to explore it, everything looks crisp with clear, beautiful textures. The photo-projected objects can definitely be noticed, as even small things like shelves, drawers, but also cans of paint and more are ridiculously detailed in that you can clearly see wear and tear on the wood and lacquer. But not only are these objects pretty to look at, you can also interact with many of these. You can pick up boxes, bottles, cans, notes, paintings, and other supplies, which make the world seem all the more believable as you can really interact with it all. Often, there's no real point to picking up these objects, but still, it is a nice addition to implement this many physics-based objects. Whenever you are playing as Adam, it's daytime, and the world just looks nice and calm, while still feeling that there might be a threat somewhere in the woods, that something is lurking. Whenever you switch to Nicholas' perspectives, it's always night and ominous, and this is where your more classic horror gameplay finds itself by you walking through old buildings or forests while the occasional jump scare occurs. The jump scares are actually really good. They don't all work, and some you can see coming from a mile away, but then there are some that appear very unexpected and get you good. It's still the cliche thing of a person often dressed in white running or crawling at you in high speed, but I got startled hard a number of times. Though you still have to solve puzzles with Nicholas, most of the puzzle solving happens during Adam's storyline. And this is actually a really good thing, and this game does something that I think more horror game developers should adhere to. Playing horror games can be very thrilling, but it can also be very exhausting if the entire experience is dark, dreary, and you are constantly on edge as you await the next jump scare. In fact, it can make the overall experience less scary because you are constantly set to expect to be scared around the next corner. But here, there are long sections where you walk with Adam through beautiful environments during the day, exploring the forests surrounding the house, that are really lovely and almost relaxing. I say almost because you never feel completely safe, and there's still a jump scare here or there during his story, but in general, you won't get a whole lot of terror thrown at you while you play as him. And that is an excellent thing, because it gives you a breather from all the scares that happen during Nicholas' story, and refuels you to continue playing, as now you can just chill a bit and learn more stuff about the story. It's something that I would like to see done more in horror games, as it always works, with examples in the past like the game Fear, that breaks up the horror with kick-ass action, or Alan Wake, that has quiet exposition moments in between the horror segments. What's also really good is that during the Nicholas segments, new types of horrors, but also gameplay, albeit somewhat familiar, gets introduced in each chapter. For example, in the first chapter you walk around the house with your lantern, and you think that this will be it for all of Nicholas's sections. The familiar walk around with your flashlight and get jump scared now and then. But then in the next chapter, you play as him, you actually get a gun and will have to deal with a ghostly figure that is stalking you throughout the woods. And then eventually, you even get the type of enemy that walks around the house and you have to hide to avoid this enemy to proceed to the next location. I do have to say that this particular gameplay type has become very tiresome, where you have no means to defend yourself and just have to hide behind closets and desks, and the moment you get seen and are not fast enough, you get killed in one shot and need to start over. It gets repetitive and frustrating quickly, and definitely takes away the scariness as you do the section over and over and over again until you get it right. This was also my big problem with the, in my opinion, overrated Alien Isolation. But at least there, you could have weapons that would temporarily get rid of the alien if it were to find and chase you. But even during the Atom sequences, new types of gameplay get introduced, with you getting a weird looking machine where you can scan locations to find out clues about who previously has been there. The machine even lets you shoot down anomalies, giving you a simple kind of shooting minigame from time to time. But my absolute favorite part about this game has to be the puzzle solving. I'm not necessarily a puzzle game fanatic, but I do of course love detective style games, and I like solving crimes, etc. And this game delivers puzzles in an almost Da Vinci Code style of gameplay, where environmental storytelling and hints can help you with the puzzles. You really have to look around with clues and interact with multiple objects or items sometimes to figure out what has to be done. It is excellent, and therefore is also a game I can recommend to lovers of adventure games like Myst or point and clicks. Almost all the puzzles are a blast to figure out, as you look through notes in the environment, and this is again one of those games where you can have a piece of paper and a pen next to you and write stuff down to help you further. Again, you feel like a real detective or code breaker, and each puzzle is unique. Some of my favorites were trying to open a heavy safe, or cracking a code to reveal a hidden door behind a fireplace using an encoding disk. I never had to look up the answer once, but with some of these puzzles, it did take me a long time to figure it out, but I loved every minute of it. I will now talk about the one massive negative point I have with this game. But first, I want to reiterate the positives. The game looks gorgeous, offers varied gameplay, settings, and scares, though some might be familiar, and the puzzles and adventure aspect are a true highlight and better than any other horror game, both indie or AAA for that matter, that has come out in the recent years. The game is about $20, which is definitely a good price, since it's also quite lengthy with around 7 hours or so on your first playthrough. And now, let's talk about the negative point, and I do have to warn you that I'm going to spoil the story of the game, because that's where the problem lies. Because of that, and if you don't want to be spoiled, please go out and get the game for yourself, and then come back. So the story, as I said, takes place during the Cold War, and this really sets up a very interesting plot and possibilities. Adam quickly gets the feeling that Soviet spies are watching him and his wife, and he even goes out to different locations like a fire watch tower and an abandoned hut where clearly someone had spent several nights and days writing information about them. The fact that it takes a possible spy theme set in the Cold War is so original that I was really excited to see where this all would go. At the same time, Nicholas has an interesting story set up with him clearly being mentally damaged through child abuse by his father, but also a plot revolving the purchase of a mine and several people getting ripped off, possibly wanting revenge on the father and his family as several gruesome murders happen in the next months. Unfortunately, the payoff of those stories is terrible, and in fact so terrible and cliche that you can literally see it coming from the first hour you play. I guess even the title gives it away, but the twist of the game at the end is that you are the killer during Nicholas's story, and you are the one who is roaming through the woods writing information down about you and your own wife. It does the split personality trick where you have a good side and a bad side, and the good side can never remember doing the bad stuff like slashing your car tires, killing the sheriff, or putting up transmitters through the forest. The "you are the monster" trope is so cliche and worn out that this did actually pull down the score a bit in the end. Especially because I was already convinced that I was the bad guy, though not entirely if I indeed had a split personality, or maybe was a sleeper agent by the communists. The fact that I was convinced and the main character spat out stupid lines like the sheriff trying to trick him by fabricating papers claiming that both families are connected is very cringeworthy. Adam really reaches for how far he thinks the Soviets are trying to trick him, and it just makes him seem so unbelievable towards the final chapters. It's also laughable to read sentences where the main characters say they cannot wrap their minds around who's responsible for all this, and at the same time, I'm rolling my eyes saying it's us. If the audience knows something before the main character does, it makes the experience very tiring. The trope of you being the bad guy or monster has been done in stories like Silent Hill 2, Shutter Island, Layers of Fear, Fight Club, Amnesia, A Machine for Pigs, and more. It's just been done to death, and I press on the matter for writers of these kind of games or stories to not use this twist anymore, because it's so cliche and disappointing by now. If there were actual Russian spies, like the game pretends there is, it would have been way more interesting and original. And with the mining dispute and the greedy father, there could also be some potential for a solid plot there. But in the end, the story, though its world storytelling is still excellent with the Cold War setting and the 19th century setting, is a big letdown, with even the cliche see yourself in the mirror reveal at the end. It's hyping the twist up so much throughout the game, but it's all very anticlimactic. Now this still does not mean that it ruined the overall experience. In fact, I had an absolute blast playing this from start to finish, exploring all the areas, getting scared, and solving brilliant puzzles. It's just that if the story was solid, it would have been an absolute must-play in my opinion. In the end, The Beast Inside gets a 7.8. Would have easily been close to an 8.5 if it weren't for the story. At the end of the credits, the text "The End" can be seen, with a logo and sound of Big Ben then appearing in a question mark, hinting at a possible sequel or DLC. I would love to see the creators make another horror setting in London, but hopefully then, with not such an overdone twist at the end of the game.